Okay, folks, so when I say feel good, you say feel great. So feel good, feel great. Feel good, feel great. How's it going, folks? This is Pat from Asphalt Green's Recess Enhancement Program here with another instructional video, and I hope that you're feeling great. This video will be talking about a game called Zap Zoom, but as always, before we get into the game, we want to start off with a safety check. So just making sure, again, that everyone is washing their hands for 20 seconds, both before and after we play our game. Making sure that everyone is keeping their hands away from their face. Making sure that if anybody has to cough or sneeze, they are, of course, dabbing into their elbow and sneezing into their own elbow. And we also want to make sure that everyone is properly social distanced so that everyone can stand 6 feet apart from one another. Okay? And once our safety check is done, just give me 2 thumbs up and we'll get started on the game. So it seems like everyone's ready to go, which means that we can hop right into the details of Zip, Zap, Zoom. Wait, what's the name of the game? Well, it's Zip, Zap, Zoom. So folks, that'll make a little bit more sense as we go along, but Zip Zap Zoom is a great game for students in 3rd grade up through 8th grade, or students within that age range. It's super fun, as students will be working on their hand-eye coordination and their active listening skills, so it's a little bit of a challenge. You can get a little silly, which means that everyone will be enjoying it. Equally as important as fun, though, the game is super safe. We'll be forming a circle or whatever shape we can really form within the play space that we'll be in. So students will be able to stand 6 feet apart from one another, and the game doesn't really require anybody to move from those spaces. So students will be properly social distanced throughout the entire game. Additionally, we won't need any equipment other than the equipment that you might want to lay down to form boundaries, so cones or tape or whatever. So students won't have to touch anything, which means that we have the 2 most important things covered for Zip Zap Zoom: fun and safety. And so with that in mind, how about we rep it out and get right into the nitty-gritty details for Zip Zap Zoom. So as always, we'll want to start with the R in the rep model, which is ready. So how do we get ready for Zip Zap Zoom? Well, as always, we'll want to map out our play space, right? And we'll want to designate the boundaries of that play space. As I said, you'll be forming a circle or whatever shape that you can form that will have students facing one another. So you want to kind of keep an area that students will be able to stand 6 feet apart from one another while also being able to face each other. Once you've done that, and you've marked your boundaries and mapped out your play space, you can remove any items that might pose a safety risk and think about how you can work around any items that just can't be moved. Students won't need to be moving too much during this game, so that won't be too much of an issue, but again, it's always good to do a safety sweep. Once that's done, you can lay out any equipment that you might need. Again, you won't need any for the game, but if you want to lay down tape or cones to designate boundaries, that is totally cool. And then once you have all of that done and you're ready to go, you can have students gather up and form a circle or whatever shape you can. And you can use the attention grabber that I used at the beginning of the video, which was feel good, feel great. Feel good, feel great. All right, if you feel great, form a circle and stand 6 feet apart from one another. So if you have all of your students gathered up and standing 6 feet apart from one another, that means that you're ready to hop right into the E portion of the rep model and explain the game to the students. As always, when we're delivering instructions to students, we want to make sure that we're using a loud, clear voice so all students can hear and understand you. And we also want to make sure that we're asking specific questions throughout our instructions. So some suggestions that we have for questions are: what happens after Zoom? And which way do you turn whenever anybody says zap? Okay? And that'll make more sense as we go through the instructions of the game. So I'll explain those instructions while you follow along on your copy of them, okay? So to play Zip Zap Zoom, we'll want to make sure that everyone, again, is in a circle and standing 6 feet apart from one another. And then what you can do is you can designate one person to start the game off. Whoever that person is going to start off the game by clap pointing to somebody on their left and saying zip. Then that person who was just zipped will then turn and point to somebody on their right and clap point and say zap. Then that person who was just zapped will find somebody new in the circle and clap point at them and say zoom. That person who was just zoomed will then start the pattern anew. So they'll point to somebody on their left and say zip. That person will point and say zap to somebody on their right. And then that person will point at somebody new and say zoom. And the whole point is to keep this pattern going over and over and over again. And if somebody makes a mistake, well, you just stop the game and then restart it up again. And that is Zip Zap Zoom. So now that we know how to explain Zip Zap Zoom, let's move into the P portion of the rep model and talk a bit about how we can play the game so students are abiding by the rules, and how we can play the game so that we keep things interesting for our students. So in order to do that, let's all gather up. So when I say feel good, you say feel great, feel good, feel great, feel good, feel great. And if everyone's feeling great, let's gather up and stand 6 feet apart from one another, of course. So folks, when you're playing Zip Zap Zoom, it's always important to remind students again to stay 6 feet apart from one another, okay? We always want to make sure that we're staying properly social distance throughout. And we also want to make sure that students are reacting quickly to the commands that are being given, okay? So if someone zips somebody, that person who's just been zipped has to quickly zap somebody else, and then they have to quickly, that person who was just zapped will have to quickly zoom somebody else, okay? And everyone should be moving quickly and reacting quickly. If anybody hesitates, it's always fun to add in a little bit of an extra activity. So say someone hesitates or makes a mistake, so they're a little bit slow on the zap, or maybe they say zip instead of zap. You can just have them step out of the circle, do 5 jumping jacks, 5 squats, any form of activity that you can think of, and then have them quickly rejoin the game, okay? And what you can also do if you find that students are getting really, really good at the game, it's always cool to modify the rules for them. So a few suggestions that we have is for level 1, you can have students form 2 circles. So you can split them off into 2 teams and they can compete against one another. So they can see who can get through the pattern within their circle, making sure that everyone gets a try first. The second level that you can move on up to might be playing an elimination round. So maybe you gather up the students one more time, you have one big circle going, and if somebody hesitates or makes a mistake, they just step out of the circle for that round, and you keep things moving so those students can get back in within a reasonable amount of time, right? And then if you find that students want to move on to something even more challenging, well, what you can do is you can have students do a specific pattern throughout their circle, making sure that everybody gets an opportunity, and then you can have them do that pattern backwards. So they're going one way and then coming back the opposite way. And that should be pretty tricky for them, and you might catch a lot of mistakes, which means you'll have a lot of students really active throughout, okay? So folks, those are our tips on how to play Zip Zap Zoom, which means that we are at the end of the rep model and our video. So how about we gather up one more time? So when I say feel good, you say feel great. So feel good, feel great, feel good, feel great. If you're feeling great, let's gather up and stay 6 feet apart from one another. So folks, I just want to thank you again for watching the instructional video for Zip Zap Zoom. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you find it fun when you play it with your students. And stay tuned for more tips and instructional videos from us here at Rep. And we'll catch you next time.